Today's story is extremely disturbing, and this is going to be your only trigger warning. So don't say you weren't warned. This is about love without limits and obsession and possession, and when they completely take over your life. There are stories that feel completely impossible to categorize throughout history. And then there are stories that refuse to stay within any boundary at all. And on May 21st of 1936, in Tokyo, a quiet arrest took place that would soon become one of its most infamous cases in all of Japanese history. At first glance, this whole arrest seemed quite routine. A woman had drawn attention after wandering the streets for several days. She had carried a handbag, which is, of course, nothing unusual, especially for a woman, especially in 1936. This wasn't exactly alarming. But inside that ordinary object was something that would turn a simple arrest into a national obsession and something extremely disturbing. The woman was Sada Abe, and her life before that moment had already been shaped by instability and pressure and a lot of need for survival. She had not begun her life in the margins, though. She was born into a respectable family in Tokyo. She was the youngest of several children, and her early years were marked not by violence or by obvious signs of what would come later on. But life doesn't always move in predictable lines. My own life is much that way itself. Circumstances, of course, shift, as they often do. Her choices narrowed, and over time, she found herself moving through environments that demanded resilience rather than comfort. That's never a fun thing to have to face. Her path led her through work that placed her into close contact with men in a world where relationships were often transactional and rarely ever stable. Over time, this shaped her understanding of connection and attachment and control. She was a geisha, but she was also a prostitute. This created a foundation where emotional boundaries were not always very clear, where intensity could replace imbalance. And by the time she met Kichitsu Ishida, she had already lived through experiences that made her view relationships differently from those around her. When she met Ishida, something inside her changed. The relationship did not develop slowly or cautiously the way a normal relationship typically would. Instead, it accelerated. They became completely absorbed in each other. They were withdrawing from the outside world. Days were spent together in isolation. They were focused entirely on one another. Their responsibilities faded. Time completely lost its usual structure. What might have seemed like passion from the outside became something far more consuming from within. And as their relationship deepened, it also narrowed. There was little room left for anything beyond the connection that they shared. This kind of intensity can feel powerful, but it's also very unstable. And without balance, without boundaries, emotion can begin to shift into something else entirely. The line between devotion and possession, it becomes really difficult to see. And once that line disappears, the direction of events becomes harder to predict. We see this today in some relationships, and we know from the outside looking in that it's easy to tell somebody to get out and to run, that this is going to turn into an abusive relationship. But it's hard to really spot it and to warn somebody unless you're actually in that position yourself. And even then, a lot of times you have on the blinders and you don't see it until it's too late. And that's what happened to Ishida. Because then came the moment that defined everything about this case. After days of isolation, Sada Abe killed Ishida while he slept. But the act itself was not what really shocked the country the most. I mean, things like this happen almost every day. A lot of it goes unnoticed. Instead, what she did next is what really shocked everyone. She didn't flee or panic or attempt to hide what she had done. She did quite the opposite. She took a part of him with her in her handbag. She cut off his genitalia and put it into her handbag. I will say this one last time. She cut off his twig and berries and put them in her bag like she was foraging. She believed that this was the only way to keep him entirely to herself. So this was not an act that was driven by rage or anger. She wasn't defending herself from some kind of abuse, but this was rooted in a mindset that had developed over a period of time. It was shaped by a need for complete possession of the someone that she loved. If you ever read about serial killers, you'll hear some of this in the way Jeffrey Dahmer spoke. He wanted to possess the people that he, you can't say loved, the people that he wanted. For several days, this woman then, with this handbag, moved through Tokyo carrying this thing with her. She visited public places. She interacted with other people. And on the surface, nothing really appeared unusual. This contrast between her actions and her outward behavior added to the shock when the truth was revealed later on. I can only imagine. But when police finally approached her, she didn't resist. She didn't attempt to deny what had happened. In fact, she identified herself and provided her proof by opening the bag without any kind of hesitation. What a shock. Her explanation was as unsettling as the act itself. She stated that she had acted out of love, not jealousy, not anger, not defense, but love. She believed that taking this final step, she could ensure that no one else would ever have him. This reasoning captured the attention of the public in ways that few cases have had before or after. It challenged assumptions about emotion, about motivation, and about the limits of human behavior. The case really quickly became a national sensation in Japan. It was discussed in newspapers. It was analyzed in conversations. It was retold in ways that reflected both fascination and discomfort. The timing also played a role. Japan at the time was facing political tension and uncertainty. The case provided a different kind of focus, one that was personal and emotional and very deeply unsettling. But what makes the story endure is not just the act itself, but the questions that it raises. It forces a confrontation with the idea that emotions, when taken to extremes, can lead to outcomes that defy logic. It highlights how intensity without balance can become dangerous, even when it begins with something that's usually considered quite positive and wonderful. In the years that followed, Sada Abe's story continued to be referenced and analyzed and reinterpreted. It became part of cultural discussions about relationships and control and identity. It remains one of the most well-known cases in Japanese history, not because it fits neatly into a category, but because it really doesn't. But one of the last things that I learned about this woman was that she kind of disappeared after about 1970 for a long time. After the discovery of Issei Sagawa, who was the Japanese man who had murdered and eaten a woman in Paris, in France, his case kind of dragged up a lot of older Japanese mysteries and horrors like this one. So people started looking into her case. And if you're not familiar with Issei Sagawa, definitely don't look up crime scene photos. You will regret it. But look up his case. Very interesting case. He is a serial killer. So another trigger warning there. It gets rough. But when they finally were able to find her again, they did find that she was in a nursing home. She was just a little old lady, just living out her days. Forgotten. But now I want to hear from you in the comments. Do you believe that the extreme actions like this are driven more by personal psychology or by the circumstances surrounding a person's life? As I said in the beginning, my own life took a lot of twists and turns, and twisted roads and ups and downs, and I had some rough times. But I didn't turn out to be a killer. So is there more to it than that? I don't know. But hey, history happens, right? And if you enjoy stories like this, make sure you follow the History Happens Facebook page for more deep dives into history's most fascinating moments. And subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode. Every subscriber helps. Thank you for watching.